and using it as a Section 8 rental. Okay. Now, this property, I'm looking at properties in this zip code 27409 because if you've seen some of my other lives before, you can kind of go to my YouTube channel. And I've been spreading out my content between analyzing deals and whatnot. So last time I looked at a 3-bedroom townhome in Greensboro, North Carolina. I thought that was a decent deal. So check it out. All right. So this one is 5725 Bramble Gate Road, Greensboro, North Carolina, 27409. And if you look at photos in general, I mean, it's not staged, but it's also relatively rent ready for a property, assuming that all the flooring is in good shape. What is this? Is this like a garden? I can't really tell what that is, but I would probably put a cage on an HVAC just in case. Make sure it doesn't get stolen. Probably some light touch-up work. That's probably like a handicap or a handicap accessible type of thing. Okay. So 2 bed, 2.5 baths, 1,054 square feet. Great. Now it looks like relatively painted, but I like to put aside a little bit of money just in case there's any sort of issues. So let me type in some numbers here. And the goal of today is for you to figure out what is a deal for you personally. And there are a couple of things, right? The first thing I want to do is go to my renovation and I go to my rehab calculator. And since this is a condo, I don't set aside any money for roof repairs, unlike some of my other older underwriting episodes where you saw me underwrite and analyze single family homes. Okay, exterior is perfectly fine. Now, for painting, I'll probably put in about 200 square feet of painting just in case there's some touch up paint here at $3 a square foot. Obviously, this will vary depending on your market, right? So just be very mindful of that. As you get quotes, you should update these spreadsheets. Now, after you go through that, what I also go through is I want to make sure a cage for the HVAC is right here equals 900 times 1. And again, you can add, subtract line items as you needed. So I got $900 to put a cage for the HVAC. So I got about $2,300 for renovations on a $145,000 home that I think is relatively turnkey. All right. You might want to replace some appliances, but you don't have to, right? It looks solid in my opinion. So the next input you need to get here is in B16, which is your monthly income rent. Now I know, now typically the normal process is you will have to look up the HUD FMR, which stands for fair market rent, find a zip code, find a county, and by bedroom count what your rent ceiling is. Now today, when I looked up Greensboro, North Carolina Housing Authority, the 2025 payment standards, it says that right here, the two bedroom payment standard here is 1247. Okay. Now it's 1247. I'm gonna put in 1247 right over here. Okay. I got 1247 right here for my rents. And this corroborates what one of my friends that invests in Greensboro, North Carolina is currently getting for the 2 bedroom apartment. Amazing. Now, if this was not the case, what I would normally do is I would take the payment standards, which usually means it's the rent ceiling, and you have to deduct the utility allowances by bedroom count by whatever sort of property it is, meaning is it a condo, is it a townhome, is it a single family home, or is it a multi-family apartment? All these factors matter. But because I have good intel, I will say, hey, let me go for 1247. Again, you have to be mindful of the rent reasonableness test. So if I were to go here, right, let's just do it out. And I did not have any friends in North Carolina that was getting these properties here. I go to the affordablehousing.com. I go to the owner section. I go to the market rent estimator. I plug in the address, plug in better count, and I can see that right here. Ooh, 1333, even higher, even better. So now this exceeds my ceiling. Great. So let me write it down these numbers here, 1333. So my partners know how to analyze deals. So this kind of works out perfectly. 1283, 1301, 1392. And I'm writing down all these numbers so that my partners don't, they already know how I analyze deals. So I'm just giving them numbers so they know exactly where I pulled it from. Now for my taxes, let's see. Let me go to my payment calculator, see what's going on here. Taxes here is 85 bucks, 85. And my insurance right here is 57. So I'm going to equals 57 times 1.2 because I'm multiplying it by 1.2 because I'm adding a 20% premium here. And that usually that insurance estimate is for someone that's living there as a primary residence home. And if you're using it as a rental property, then chances are you're going to want to add a premium because insurance companies view investment assets as riskier assets. So that's why I'm multiplying it by 1.2. For maintenance, I'm using 5% here, not my usual 10% because it's an HOA. So there's a certain portion of HOA expense that goes towards common expenses like the roof, right? It's big capital expenditure item. So I got 5% right here. A little bit lower than my normal 10%, but that's because I have a large HOA of 250 in this scenario. So let's go with that. 10% for property management expenses, and I got 5% for vacancy. Now, if you watched my live stream yesterday and we talked about how there will be a 2-year limit on able-bodied individuals for rental assistance, it's roughly about 5% vacancy. So be very mindful about your vacancy expenses right now. I will not go lower than 5% just to be conservative here. All right. So now, quick reminder, you should always have a maintenance number here, right? I call it a war chest, but you got to remember that, hey, if you don't set aside money every single month for maintenance, right? You know that the water heater is going to get replaced at some point, right? You know that something's going to break inside the home at some point. Then you would be grossly underestimating your expenses and then you're going to overestimate your profitability because you underestimate your expenses. Don't be that person, all right? Especially if you're a long-term buy and hold investor, you cannot afford to do something like that. Frankly, it's a little irresponsible for you to do that. All right. So let's keep going through these numbers here. Now, for this property, if I do a 25% down on this property in F19, that means for my down payment, it's going to equal to my B4, which is my asking price, multiplied by my down payment percentage of 25%. That gives me $36,250. I got 3.5% for my closing costs here. I got $2,300 for my renovations that we talked about. So my financing amount is going to equal to my B4, which is my asking price, subtract my down payment amount. So I'll be financing 108,750, assuming I buy this property for 145, right? And let's go to 7.5% interest rate right now for, I think I just closed a deal the other day at 7.8. So 7.5 seems roughly in line. So if I rent this property out as a 2-bedroom for $1,247, right? Let's call it that. I'll be negative $166 cash flow a month. That is negative 4.6% return, assuming I bought this property for 145. So you're thinking, okay, great. It's not a deal. Rod, appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, man. All right. So now think about this. How do you adjust the levers to make this property a deal, quote unquote, for yourself? Now, if I were you, the first lever I would put down is, okay, let's say my target return in E9 is 8%. If that is the case, what do I need to buy this property at for this to make sense, for this to achieve my target return of 8%, right? Assuming everything else stays constant, if I lower this purchase price to 100 grand, that still doesn't do the trick. If I go to 90 grand, if I go to 85 grand, if I go to 80 grand, let's go to 82. Great. So that still rounds up to 8%. Let's call that my target cash return. So you would, assuming everything else stays constant, right? 2340, 25% down, 7.5% interest rate. You have to buy this property for 82 grand. Now, what's the chance of that happening? Probably not that likely, right? The investor is probably not, or the seller is probably not going to accept your deal at 82 when they list it for 145. Great. Now let's talk about other scenarios. What if your interest rate dropped to 6.5%, right? So it dropped down by a full point, and you see when I lowered my interest rate in K7, my cash on cash return jumped up to 9.6%. So this means I can now all of a sudden afford to pay maybe 88,000 instead of 82. And that's how you play around with the numbers for you to figure out, hey, was it the deal for you, assuming you're just buying this property on the market without any sort of other implications, right? So this is something that you want to consider. Now, let me do a couple more scenarios. Well, let's say you're able to buy this property for 6.5% now. What if you got into the property and all of a sudden you discover that there's some mold behind the walls, or all the plumbing needs to get replaced because it's all out of code? Well, what if your rehab quadrupled by 4 times 4? So now you see that my cash on cash return just dropped even more. So now, even though I picked up a little bit of surplus because of the lower interest rate, but after my inspection, it quadrupled. So now I have to go ask the seller, hey, I need a $8,000 credit because now the numbers only make sense for me at $80,000 purchase price if I want to just achieve a measly 8% return on my capital. Okay. And this is how you keep emotions out of the deal. And I'll show you one more thing. You might be thinking, Ken, how often does it drop by 1 whole point for interest rate? Well, just remember that the 30-year mortgage interest rates are affected by 2 things. One is the interest rate on the 10-year treasury yield, and the other factor is the spread between the 10-year yield and the 30-year mortgage interest rates. Now, if you just Google 30-year mortgage interest rates versus 10-year yield graph, you can see this. Let's just do 2024. So it's 1-year data. And you can see at some point, there's a tremendous amount of risk, right? In this case, the spread was like 2.5%. Historically, that spread is 1.5 to 2%. All right. But sometimes you see it narrowing when there's more confidence in the data, when you get headline news now. And you also need to understand that the bond traders are faster. The bond traders are faster than the Federal Reserve. So let's just say hypothetical. I'm not saying it's happening right now, okay? But let's say Trump says, hey, I know who I'm going to have go replace Jerome Powell as the chair of the Federal Reserve. This guy is now going to go out and start telling everybody, hey, as soon as I get in 8 months from now, 12 months from now, I'm going to start lowering interest rates. So that's how they can play the market to get the interest rates to go down, simply with verbiage that they're putting out to the market that they can anticipate when interest rates will go down. And that's how you can get moves overnight, right? Your bond traders can knock down your 10-year yield by 0.5 point, and then you have good news on the tariffs saying, hey, blah, 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 we struck a deal with who? Blah, 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 we have more certainty. And when you have more certainty, that spread between the 10-year yield and the 30-year mortgage rates, it narrows. And that's how you can get 1 point move on your 30-year mortgage interest rates overnight. And when you saw how we underwrote that property, right? All of a sudden, your buying power for that property, when it went from 7.5% to 6.5% that we just talked about, went from $82,000 to $88,000. And that's very real. That's a very good possibility. So especially if you're just trying to buy properties on the market for Section 8 purposes, this is the perfect time for you to figure out whether or not it's a deal. And if it's not a deal, at what point is it a deal? So pay very close attention to mortgage interest rates. And then once you get into the deal, then you can figure out, okay, well, what does my rehab look like? Who's my team? And I brought on tons of folks from everybody. I've had people from North Carolina, from Detroit, from Birmingham, Alabama, from St. Louis. I've had so many people come onto the podcast so that you can have a head start in choosing the right contractors, the right property management companies. And hopefully that makes you just feel a little bit less afraid about how to invest in affordable housing. Again, this is not investment advice. I'm not soliciting any investments on this call. I just wanted to share something with you that I wished I had when I first started. All right. I hope you all have an amazing Saturday. I hope you all spend some quality time with your family and friends today, because that's what life is all about. All right. And I'm so grateful for all of you. Thank you so much for caring about affordable housing. Without people like all of you, I would have never had the home I grew up in. So I appreciate you all so much. If you guys want, go back to this replay, and you guys want to copy the spreadsheet, don't forget, you guys want to copy the spreadsheet that we use today, just look at affordablehousing.io, go to the get deal analysis section. Let me share my screen really quick. And that's it. Just go to affordablehousing.io, go to the get deal analysis tool, Plug in your name, email, your phone number. That's the fastest free and copy the spreadsheet that we use today. And that's it. It's all free. Have an amazing Saturday. I'll see y'all tomorrow for day 646. Have a good one.